Siza nina na itsada at Tsuu'tina Gunaha Institute nihina he isklinat. My name is Stephen Crowchild, and I'm the director of the Tsuu'tina Gunaha Institute. It's the language revitalization program of the Tsuu'tina Nation. Language revitalization is all-encompassing of all ages, right from newborns and all the way up to elders. So our program, we oversee specifically the language delivery and the Tsuu'tina education system. So we provide language teachers from K4 to grade 12, as well as the adult classes. So we work with all ages in the education system. We also have a language teacher in our daycare and Head Start programs. And we do a lot of work with our elders, so it's all ages. In terms of our Indigenous identity, and specifically Tsuu'tina identity and our nationhood, language is one of the key pillars of that, and language and culture also go hand in hand. And so our goal is, and our focus is, language revitalization, but that's all-encompassing of all subject matters, all areas. It's in addition to day-to-day communication, like there is a lot of knowledge and wisdom and like healing through the language. We have a really young staff, and even when I started, like it's been learning my language and learning my culture and being immersed in it every day. Like it has been healing in terms of like intergenerational traumas and stuff that I've experienced personally, and it's the same with like members of our staff too, and we all have different reasons for working in this field, but for the main part, like it doesn't boil down to a specific subject matter. It doesn't boil down to like different subjects. Like it's land-based. It's like we have goals to incorporate our own stories, our own history, our own language into other subject areas in the curriculum, so that the Alberta curriculum, so our students can, operate in both worlds, but also like still have that identity and continuing on like what was left for us by our ancestors. So we do a lot of land-based stuff. It is healing in itself, and it's a proactive approach, to addressing a lot of these issues that face Indigenous peoples, such as like the child welfare, the missing and murdered Indigenous women, the like suicide rates, alcohol and addictions. It's like from my viewpoint, it encompasses all of that, and it is a proactive way of solidifying our identity, carrying on what was left for us, and just like creating healthier young people and community members. Our mandate, our vision statement, we're committed to the full revitalization of the Tsuu'tina language in all forms, spoken and written, and as a legacy to like the past, present, and future Tsuu'tina people. So our program objective is language revitalization, but that does bring us into other areas. So the aim, in a nutshell, our objective is language revitalization, and we do that whatever way we can. Well, in terms of excellence in Indigenous education, I definitely like it needs to come back down to like being good human beings, and like the Western education, it's a lot different than ours, and it's like what we're doing here, like what could be an example of excellence in Indigenous education is we're not looking for outside validation from universities or like the academic community, business world, government. Like this is something that, we have the strengths already within our community. They're all there, and things are fractured because of like intergenerational traumas and all these kind of negative side effects from the residential schools. But the point is they're still there, and as much as like outside assistance is appreciated, like how we could be an example of like excellence in Indigenous education is that we don't look for those outside things. Like we prop up our own people's voices, our own history, our own stories, language, knowledge. And so that's one example of like, I guess, being true to yourself and being, as a nation, as peoples, and like really propping up your own, and not looking for outside validation. But another good example on like excellence in Indigenous education is like the generational, like there's huge generational gaps between our elders and our kids, and that's something like we include elders in our programming at all levels, right from training sessions to actively in the school dealing with like interacting with our students and just their presence there. So those like that's another example, and including like parents and things like that's something that we're still learning. But like education traditionally was done from all areas of the family, right from your mother to your uncles, aunties, like grandparents. Like those were educators, and that's the reality is now like we have to adhere to these curriculum standards and conduct standards in order to have funding and stuff like that. But we're trying to recreate those types of natural education, like traditional education approaches, like because it is intergenerational. Like when we do programs like culture camps or initiatives in the school, like you do include the community's like experts on being outdoors and trapping and hunting and that types of stuff. We include the storytellers to come in and tell stories, and so that intergenerational transmission of knowledge is like that's something that we have to try and rebuild and encourage. And being next to like a city of over 1 million people, and like the fast-paced lifestyle, like that's something that really does damage to our own systems. And so just rebuilding, recreating those the natural education approach, that's something that could be an example of excellence. Another example of excellence too is like people who come in to teach in our community or come in to work in our community, like it's not the same as just entering a like working relationship with some outside organization or some outside school. Like they're coming into our home, and we can learn from the past where we have had a chief Bullhead. I heard stories of him like saying like this is what you need to teach our kids, like even though like with the residential schools and stuff like that. And so it's the same approach. Like when we have a good partnership with our own education department out here, and it is operated right now, like currently managed by a Tsuu'tina person, which is amazing. So just having our own people lead our own education, that's one example of excellence, because she does have the vested interest. And working, like setting standards for our outside people that come into our community and teach our kids and interact with them on a daily basis. Like we provide that kind of training to them, like how to interact with the community, how to conduct yourself in like different scenarios, like protocol, but also language too. And it's like that's a really good example of excellence, is like, and also like a good example of like being good allies and good support people, and rebuilding our communities, like because they are actively using the language, they are actively demonstrating like these values, and they're learning, and it's always a learning experience. But like if you're not uncomfortable, then you're not learning and you're not growing. So like there's definitely a lot of growing pains that happen here or there, but like that's another example of excellence, is us setting the pace and setting the bar for outside people coming in to educate our kids and educate and work amongst our community. So that's another example of excellence, and that's something that could be done anywhere. Like we definitely should set the tone for our own communities and set the what our expectations are, because we've historically we've always had those placed on us, and that has made us value our own systems and our own knowledge less than like the European and Western way of doing things. But like you see people slowly start indigenizing campuses or indigenizing policies, and like you see all these different like how would you say it, we had it right from the start, so why not rebuild what worked for us for thousands of years. So in terms of education, and there's another example of like excellence is just that persistence. Like it's not a easy job, it's a thankless job, but it's something that in order to honor like our past and our ancestors and the people that have brought us here today, like this is something that we can do. And even the treaties and stuff, like those were like sacred agreements, and by honoring that and putting that to the forefront, and like that's any organization or like I guess education institute and all that, like when they put treaty at the forefront, like that's another example of excellence, because that's so there's I guess those are the main ones, like really determining your own, setting the pace for your own, valuing your own systems and knowledge. Like those are definitely, and bridging that intergenerational gap. Like those are definitely some examples of excellence that, not just with our program, but, like we try to follow best practices, and these are some of the things that we've seen in other places that, where they have fostered healthy growth and identities, and those are some examples, I guess. Something like language revitalization, especially the way that we're going at it, like it doesn't fit in a box of like measurement, and the way we measure success right now is a lot of like anecdotal evidence and comments and feedback, and visibility, definitely visibility. I've heard comments, like in terms of like anecdotal evidence, like we've heard comments that like this is the most Tsuu'tina that's been spoken in the community since like the 70s. This is the most visibility that the language has, and like the most importance. And so that's one. Like we hear stories of kids being asked to say prayers at like Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinners in the language. We hear stories of like parents asking like, what is my kid saying? I have no idea what they're saying. They're talking in the language, or talking with each other in the language. The overall respectful atmosphere that you see from like young people, especially particularly in our schools that we actually have control over. Like those are ways that we can measure like success, and it's going to be like language revitalization. Like it's not a 5-year plan, it's not a 10-year plan, like it's lifelong. And like our ultimate goal as a program is to work ourselves out of a job where there is the need to have language revitalization, and that it's just something that's common and out there and used and being transmitted in homes. And so the more we see young parents engaging in language learning, the more we see elders, the more we see just general community members engaging in language learning and using it, like that's, you can measure success that way. And so it's just and things like milestones, like when we complete projects and stuff like that, and the response and feedback and usage. Like we did an app development, we've done animations, video projects, and just hearing the feedback and usage of those, like that's another way we can measure success as well. And yeah, like it's definitely the visibility. Like once you start, once you start hearing phones answered in Tsuu'tina, once you start hearing like those types of day-to-day interactions, like that's another way we can measure success. So yeah, it's really hard to like find some accurate tool, and this is the same with like all Indigenous language programs that I've studied. Like there's no sure, you can track assessment in school, track grades and all that, but what are those grades based off of? You can track like I don't know, the number of speakers or all that types of stuff, but what about all the people that like understand fluently or know this or know that? That's something with Indigenous language revitalization. Like I'm not aware of any current way that people are accurately tracking success overall. You can track success in like isolated scenarios like language nests or schools or those types of things, but like as a program, ours is like full revitalization, and so yeah, it's right now we know something's working, but it's in terms of how we measure it, that's something that we're still developing. In terms of Indigenous education, like it's the family, it's the community, it's the like knowledge keepers, and Indigenous education is it is lifelong learning, and it's right from the day where we choose our parents and that types of stuff. And Indigenous education is definitely like those healthy family structures, healthy support systems, and whether it's like it's based on our knowledge and our history, our languages, and it's how would you say it? It's like you think back on how they learned things traditionally. They learned things by being immersed in it. They learned by doing, like we're hands-on and visual people, and land-based people, and it's Indigenous education, I guess, is like anything that kind of emulates that, or like those places, like the best like in ceremony, in immersion environments, in like all of those places out on the land. And in terms of like at a higher level, like because that's more of like a grassroots level, like the best education is within our own families and within the teachings we carry and within the language we carry, and like that's traditionally where our lessons were learned. And so that was our education system. But now, like, we kind of have to adjust to current realities with the world we live in today. And so I definitely think like environments that are rooted in the principles of being a good human being and respect and humanity and that types of stuff, honoring like our wisdom, and like those types of environments are what I consider like good examples of like Indigenous education. But also like truth, like you not sugarcoat the past, and in order for us to move on from it, like it does need to be talked about. Like you can't just talk about it for a year, talk about it for 2. Like people heal all differently, and I just think like any in terms of like higher education, like in post-secondary and stuff, like it's hard to see it as compatible sometimes. Like there's 2 separate like systems, I guess. Over the next 10 years, I would really like to, I can only speak for like my own community and like surrounding like communities that I have like like affiliation with or like lineage or whatever, but for the next 10 years, like I would like to see our kids and our children, like, being, how would you say it, nurtured and in an environment of like, love and language and culture and also like equipping them with the tools that they need to like take on this outside world that we face every day. And I like it's sad to say, like, but for the next 10 years, like, because that is like something short term, like I'd like to see like our youth and kids, like, well, one, having that identity instilled in them, like in all areas of the education system that we like currently operate in, but not only that, but like we need to like equip them with the I don't even want to say like the thick skin to deal with the outside world right now, especially as it is. Like there's so much discrimination and racism and we can't just tiptoe around these issues, and like we need to teach our kids how to speak out against that stuff and how, well, in a good way, not in like a confrontational like way that's gonna invoke more of this stuff, but just those having those foundations of like humanity and love and but also like being rooted in what's been left by our ancestors, this treaty that we have, this these responsibilities that we have as well. And so I'd like to see like pretty much good human beings like being developed in like in education systems, whatever they want to do with their life. Like it's so hard to say right now because like the workforce and economy and everything, like who knows what it's going to look like in 10 years, what kind of careers people are going to be pursuing. But as long as they have an identity of who they are, as long as they have that foundation of family, and like that's for the next 10 years there. And also like in terms of like outside, like we wouldn't be dealing with these issues of racism and systemic discrimination and all that if the education system did its job in the first place with mainstream society. If they told the truth, and if they did it in a way of compassion and actively trying, like this whole reconciliation thing, but it's like for the next 10 years, like I'd like to see like really solid legislative changes in how education, like not only curriculum, but like right now we have an NDP government in Alberta, and there is a lot of like progress being made with different curriculum initiatives and stuff, but conservatives get back in, like all that stuff could just be completely like derailed. Like right now they're saying like work fast because this government won't get back in, and try to solidify as much stuff as you can right now. And that's sad and that's not the way it should be. Like there should be some whether it's federal or constitutional, like it should be constitutional, like it is, like this, like through like Section 35 and like that kind of stuff in terms of like the truth that's being spoken in curriculum and in schools. Like I would like to see like you can't. I'd like to see like some type of legislative change where you just can't undo all of this work that's being done right now. And yeah, just so it's like mainstream. Like I'd like to see more. I'd like to see like actual. How can I say it? Right now, it's always like the non-confrontational or like those kind of voices that get amplified in these institutions, and like it's. I'd like to see like more like attacking these things head on, these issues, and within these education systems, like even like an apology from you can have like some government apology to the rest of Canadian society for miseducating them. Like there's apologies for us for like residential schools, and what apologize to mainstream society for not telling them the truth about things. And and yeah, so like that would be cool within the next 10 years. But yeah, within our own school system out here, like I do see a lot more. I'd like to see immersion schools within 10 years. I'd like to see a lot of land-based teach-ins, and just, yeah, definitely a lot more community involvement and just recreating those natural education systems. One concrete one could be that, like some type of apology to mainstream society. Maybe that'll validate them a bit, like, because it's always an uphill battle when you're trying to like re-educate someone who's been indoctrinated with all of this misinformation or mispresented facts or just straight lies about Indigenous peoples in Canada. And a lot of those attitudes and that indoctrination, like those are the people that do make policy decisions. Those are the people that do write on comment boards these racist things. Those are, so like it'd be cool for more, instead of focusing on us and all, like, well, obviously we like the focus is there, but that's something concrete that would definitely like validate everything that Indigenous people have been saying like for so long. Is like, it'd be cool to see some type of apology to like mainstream society for miseducating them. So that's something that there is potential to change some of these attitudes with that kind of action. Legislative change, like really legislating this Indigenous curriculum and PD and like professional development strategies for people who are educating, like, everyone. So I'd like to see a lot of those, and it is happening slowly. It is happening, and it'd be cool to see it a bit more quicker, because like it's people's lives we're talking about. And what else? Materials. It'd be cool I don't know if this is funding, but it'd be good to see a lot more like forums and a lot more spaces created for people in Indigenous, because we all work in silos. It seems like everyone works in silos, but yeah, there needs to be more like spaces created to share information, to empower each other, to like best practices, that types of stuff. And so that's another thing that like I'd like to see. I'd like to see more of those spaces created, and resource sharing. Like it does come down to funding it, but like one tangible thing like that we like here, like it'd be good to have like a production, like publishing, printing house or something like that, or like a graphic or like an animation, or like those kind of supports, like grant writers, like all those types of things, and have our own people doing it, not creating jobs for like more, like Indian Affairs bureaucracy is enough. Like it's just I guess just more spaces created for us to share and for us to exchange. And yeah, so that's something that, what else would be supportive? Yeah, and more funding. That's always comes down to that.